So I've been rewatching The Flash recently, and after I finished Season 1, I made a video ranking all the episodes of Season 1. Now that I'm finished with Season 2, I want to be doing the same for Season 2. In this video, I'm going to be going over all 23 episodes of the second season of The Flash, ranking them from worst to best, giving a short review of the episodes, and while I'm doing that, you will see the score that I give for each episode. So with that in mind, let's start with number 23.
Who saved Central City. Hate to rain on your parade.
My name is Jay Garrick. Your world is in danger.
The first episode of the season is, in my opinion, the worst, and the first, I think, bad episode of The Flash. This episode is all over the place. The way they explain the ending of the last season, where Ronnie just all of a sudden dies, I think that it was out of nowhere, and it just wasn't handled well at all. Not to mention that not only are the fight scenes between The Flash and Atom Smasher, who should be a hero but is now a one-off terrible villain, they're really bad looking, but also Barry kills Atom Smasher pretty mercilessly, which all in all I think made for a very bad episode, except for the part where Jay Garrick, who turned out to be Zoom, debuted. That was really cool. For the most part, however, I really don't like this episode.
How are we gonna stop that guy?
The suit will only absorb one of Gray's punches. Anything more than that, you'll be like a piñata.
Please.
Episode 19 shows Barry not having his powers anymore, going up against a villain named Griffin Grey, as the Griffin Grey character kidnaps Harry Wells. The episode that ensues is not very good. It's definitely one of the worst of the season, and for the most part, it's kind of filler. There is one death that is of Killer Frost from Earth 2, but honestly, that could have happened off screen earlier in the season, and you could just really skip this episode, and you would basically understand everything. So yeah, I do think that this episode is kind of filler and pointless and not very good.
People die. I will take you down.
We'll see about that.
I didn't think you had it in you, son.
I'm touched.
Episode 3 was not bad at all. It's definitely low on the list, but it's not bad. This season is a very good season, and even the third to worst episode is still not bad. This episode was not my favorite Captain Cold episode, and I feel like it was there just really to make him more sympathetic, more of a good guy for Legends of Tomorrow once he joins the team, which I guess it did that, but also was a little bit forced considering what he's done in the last season. But overall, an okay episode that it just isn't anywhere near my favorite of the season.
Her forever.
Then that's what I'll do. I'll tell Patty I'm the Flash.
Episode 10 was definitely an okay episode, definitely not anywhere near my favorite, but also I don't think it was bad at all. The villain of the episode, the Turtle, was kind of creepy. Definitely not an incredible villain at all, but definitely a creepy and pretty good villain, and although he is a one-off villain, he is still not bad at all. I think this episode, while not being anywhere near the best of the season, and it's fairly low on the list, it's still got a lot of great moments, and it's definitely not a bad episode at all.
I'm pretty sure one telepathic grape ape is more than enough for this city. I still don't have my speed. I can't stop him.
Guerrilla Warfare is not my favorite Gorilla Grodd episode. It's honestly a little bit more forgettable than the other Gorilla Grodd episodes over the course of the show. It's still pretty good. It's still got a lot of great moments and a lot of great Gorilla Grodd moments as well, especially at the end when he gets the Gorilla City. That was definitely very exciting to see what they would do with that in the future. So overall, while Guerrilla Warfare, again, another episode that is still pretty good, albeit fairly low on the list, is at this point on the list.
Shoot fire out of your hands, dude.
And you can do all this only with a willing partner.
I deserve the Firestorm Matrix.
You set up a fly, right? Damn right.
Now, I did say that I just didn't really like how they killed off Ronnie. I thought the way they went about it was so weird, but at the same time, I do like this new Firestorm as well, and I did like his origin story in this episode, including the fight scenes with the villain Tokamak. However, I will say in the structure of the season, this episode is very weird, as they introduce this new Firestorm and have this whole episode about him, but then he just leaves. This obviously was set up for Legends of Tomorrow, but in the structure of the season, it's really weird, even though it's definitely not a bad episode at all.
As your memories come back to you, so will other things as well.
Savage is going to decimate Central City.
What we need to do is get rid of him.
You're not going to get rid of him.
Watch us.
Heroes Join Forces is by far my least favorite crossover to date, hence the fact that this episode, even though it's a crossover episode, is very low on the list. Usually, crossover episodes are going to be very high. However, it's not at the bottom, even though I really don't like this crossover because the first part is definitely not as bad as the second part. Legends of Today had some very good and fun moments, like Team Arrow and Team Flash teaming up was so much more fun in this episode than in the second episode, and this episode didn't have what the second episode had and what was bringing it down. So because of that, it's actually going to be a little bit higher on the list than some of the other episodes, and at least higher than I expected it to be before rewatching the season.
Bring me the Flash's speed.
I wasn't fast enough.
Episode 12 was a fairly good episode of the season. The main villain of the episode, Tar Pit, his CGI was pretty cool, even though the villain himself definitely wasn't as fleshed out and maybe he could have been. The CGI for the character was still pretty cool, but definitely my favorite part of the episode was the fact that Harry revealed to Team Flash that he was stealing the Flash's speed. I really liked how they handled that. I mean, usually they wouldn't really go about that, where a person just tells the other person what's going on, and that did kind of resolve the conflict in the end, and I really liked how they handled that, and not to mention the actual conflict was also pretty intense as well. So overall, while this episode definitely isn't anywhere near my favorite, it is still a very good episode that deserves to be higher on the list, but it just isn't as good as every other episode that is lower than.
Sand demons from my world. Let me teach you how to stop them.
How exactly do you know all this?
Where I came from, they called me the Flash.
I don't like the fact that Barry killed Sand Demon, and that's actually the second episode in a row that Barry killed a villain. That was so weird, that the fact that they did that, but unlike episode 1, this episode doesn't really have anything else bad going for it. I mean, just to see the Flash of two worlds, Barry Allen and Jay Garrick, or who we thought was Jay Garrick, teaming up for the first time, it was really cool. In spite of the fact that Jay didn't have his speed, it was still very cool to see what they did there and how they recreated the iconic panel. Even though that moment was kind of cringy, it was also very cool to see. So overall, the second episode of the season was definitely a huge improvement over the first.
Infected my world. Now he's coming for yours. You're not ready to fight soon.
You're the superhero, Flash. Do your job. What do you know about Zoom?
Everything. I created Zoom.
The fifth episode of the season saw the introduction of Harry Wells, which was really cool to see, and how they involved the character in this episode. Also, Dr. Light, the villain, while she herself wasn't amazing or anything, I did really like what she brought to the episode, how she affected the episode, mostly with the blind date between Barry and Patty, which was, in my opinion, a lot of fun. So yeah, this episode's definitely very good.
He doesn't know what they're doing. Scary, aren't they? Holy Harry Potter.
In the 17th episode of the season, Barry goes back to the first season in the 11th episode to get help from Eobard Thawne to get faster to beat Zoom, and this was just such a cool concept that they executed so well. To see that episode from a different perspective, for Barry to alter the timeline of an episode we already saw, it was just such a cool concept that I do think they executed very well, and overall, very good episode in the end.
You do that
By recreating the particle accelerator explosion.
The last time he was in a coma for 9 months.
I know what I'm doing.
This could kill my son.
I have to do this.
The 20th episode of the season was a very good one as well. I mean, most of the episodes of the season are, but Rupture definitely was good enough to make it this high on the list. The villain himself for Rupture, Dante Ramon of Earth 2, was pretty good. His motivation, being tricked by Zoom, was very interesting, but obviously the main attraction of this episode was the discussion and build-up to Barry being put in the particle accelerator explosion thingy again, and how that led into the rest of the season. Rupture, I think, is a great episode.
I'm faster than I've ever been. I can take him down.
You can lock up the darkness.
Versus Zoom was, for the most part, an amazing episode that could have been maybe the second best episode of the season. I mean, seeing Zoom's origin story, seeing Zoom explain what his plan is and what the episode says versus Zoom. I mean, the fight scenes and the confrontations between the Flash and Zoom, it was so cool to see. But this episode had one huge problem that because of it, it's a lot lower on the list and isn't even in the top 10, as the moment that Barry gives Zoom his speed was such a stupid moment. It was really badly badly written and executed. Barry giving him a speed was definitely not an idea that couldn't have been done well, but the way that they did it, Barry could have just not done that, and he could have stopped Zoom right then and there. He had the ability to. It was such a stupid moment that made it so that this episode is not even in the top 10, but everything else in this episode is really, really cool, and I would even say that if that last moment wasn't there, this episode probably would have ended up being the second best episode of the season.
Get him out, damn it. You can't get him out,
I don't
can
know
you?
if I can.
Please let me go back right now. My whole world is in danger.
You're not going back.
Zombie Girder was definitely not a great villain, but this episode was very, very good for the most part. Barry going around the Speed Force, talking to basically every single person in his life that was ever important to him, and in the end getting his speed back was such a cool moment. And this episode overall was definitely one of the more emotional episodes of the season, and visually and the way it was directed, I really, really liked it. So this episode definitely deserves to be in the top 10.
His lair. He's a bad guy. I'm calling it a lair. Tell us where he's keeping them. Are you serious? We're going up there? I'm wearing wingtips here. I don't have much tread.
Exploring Earth 2 in the two-parter between Welcome to Earth 2 and Escape from Earth 2 was so cool to see, and while the second episode is certainly not as good as the first episode, it is still very, very cool, and it's got a lot of great and very intense moments throughout. I mean, like I said, just being on Earth 2, just exploring Earth 2 was really cool, and the fact that Zoom was there in this episode and how he was in this episode, it was just so cool to see. So overall, Escape from Earth 2 definitely deserves to be in the top 10, and while it's not as good as Welcome to Earth 2, it's still a very, very, very good episode.
This thing is a killing machine.
He's headed for the docks. Let's do this thing.
Not only does this episode have one of the best one-episode storylines of the season with an amazing villain in King Shark, where the CGI and the fight scenes were just so good, and the inclusion of John Diggle and Lila Michaels from Arrow was a lot of fun, but also this episode saw the reveal of who Zoom is, which was Jay Garrick, which I thought was such a great reveal. So King Shark in episode 15 of the season is definitely one of the best.
You always have to be the hero. And while you're playing the good little boy, I'll be busy winning.
In the penultimate episode of the season, Barry is very optimistic after coming out of the Speed Force, and now he has his power back, and that was the main storyline of this episode, along with Black Siren being the main villain, which all I think worked. But the reason this episode is going to be as high as it is, aside from the fact that for the most part it's a very, very fun episode, it's also the ending where Zoom shows up again and kills Henry Allen. That is so intense and so emotional. That was the main reason that this episode is going to be as high as it is. The rest of the episode is great, but that moment was definitely one of the best moments of the season.
Barry is protecting your world, and our world needs a Flash now.
They could be stuck there forever.
The first part of the Earth 2 two-parter, episode 13, titled Welcome to Earth 2, was just so much fun. And not only, but just watching the entirety of the exploration of Earth 2 and how they handled Earth 2 itself. Again, it was so much fun, but also so interesting. And there were so many great scenes, like when Barry talked to Nora Allen of Earth 2, which was so emotional. This episode was exactly what you would want from a multiverse exploration episode of The Flash, which I think they 100% nailed, making this one of the best episodes of the season.
Purely scientific. Was she good looking?
Heard the Flash went nuts.
From street to freak.
Now you're probably surprised by this episode being as high as it is, and I honestly am as well, but upon rewatch of the season, it's scary how well this episode works in the structure of the season. The actual main storyline of the episode with Eliza Harmon being Trajectory, this new speedster villain in Central City, it's fine, it's good, it works, and it's got a lot of great moments around it, but it's the ending of the episode which really makes it as good as it is. The episode leading up to Barry and the rest of Team Flash Flash figuring out by themselves that Jay Garrick is Zoom. It's that moment, the build up to that moment, and the moment itself is one of the most intense moments of the entirety of the show, and is why this episode is as high as it is, in spite of the fact that the rest of the episode doesn't deserve to be this high. That moment, it was so intense and worked so well within the structure of the season that although I am very surprised how much I love this episode, I think it deserves to be in the top 5.
This is where he learns about you. All of you. This is his origin story. And there's nothing you can do about it.
Episode 11 was the first time we ever saw the pre-Nora Allen's death version of the Reverse Flash, and it was so awesome to see. Seeing him explain his origin story, seeing him be how different he is from the Season 1 version of Harrison Wells, and being played by Matt Letcher as well. It was just so cool to see, and it's so weird to me that this is the only time we ever got something like this. I think they should have just done this like once a season. That would have been cool, so cool, but because of the fact that it's the first time and the only time they ever did it, it's definitely more unique and deserves to be very high on this list, as this episode was just awesome.
This time, 3 against 1. Ho ho ho.
Feliz Navidad! Time for a real war on Christmas.
This mid-season finale is different from the rest because it isn't about the main villain of the season. Zoom isn't really in it that much. He is, but he's not the main villain. The villains are the Trickster and Weather Wizard, and even though this episode doesn't really have any incredibly epic moments, and this episode doesn't have any moments that you would think that would make a mid-season finale as good as it can be, I still absolutely love this episode. I think it's so much fun, and I think the Trickster and Weather Wizard's plan and how they executed it, it was just so genius, and it felt so comic booky. It also felt like a cartoon. It felt like this entire episode was an episode of Justice League Unlimited. I mean, there was a Christmas episode of Justice League Unlimited featuring mostly the Flash, and this episode really felt like that, more so than any other Christmas episode or mid-season finale of the Flash, so I absolutely love this episode. Not to mention that the ending with Wally West appearing was actually a little bit emotional. The lead up to that and Joe and Iris's reaction, it worked so well. So this is one of my favorite episodes of the show and of this season.
Him to suffer for everything that he's done.
You want revenge. If that's why you're doing this, you will lose.
This episode is honestly my favorite season finale of The Flash. I think it is really, really good. It begins with the fallout of Henry Allen being killed by Zoom in episode 22, and this continues it. It's already very emotional from the very beginning. We see an awesome fight scene between Barry and the Flash, and while there are parts that I don't love for the most part, it is still a very, very fun episode, and I think that it kind of nails the landing of the entire season. Not to mention that the first time I watched this episode, the ending of the episode when Barry saves Nora, it was insane. It was one of the most hype moments of the show. Looking back now, it's not as exciting because I know what's to come, but when it first came out, it was so exciting that I can't at least a little bit consider that for how much I like the episode. So yeah, this is a very good finale, and probably my favorite finale of the entire show.
Take my emblem, throw it through the breach, Zoom will come to collect my body, and we can travel.
As if it could be anything else at number 1, episode 6, titled Enter Zoom, was an incredible episode, one of the best episodes of the show, and one of the best episodes of the Arrowverse. The part where they're trying to trick Zoom, they're trying to use the Earth 1 version of Linda Park as Dr. Light to trick Zoom and trap him, was a lot of fun, but obviously it was the moment that Zoom actually appeared and beat the crap out of Barry in one of the most intense fight scenes in the entirety of the Arrowverse, one of the most intense scenes, and one of the best fight scenes overall, showcasing how scary and powerful Zoom is. This episode was amazing, and I would say that it is one of the best episodes of the show, and easily deserves to be number 1 on this list, and honestly, it's not even close. So let me know in the comments down below what your ranking for every episode of The Flash Season 2 would be. And if you like this video, definitely check out my ranking for every episode of The Flash Season 1. And as always, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.